Good evening, everybody. We're waiting, just trying to get the last few people some seats, but I think we're going to make a start because we've got a lot to get through this evening, and we are aiming to finish at 9:30. On behalf of Church Together, can I welcome you tonight to this hustings? My name is Jane Mainwaring, and I'm a vicar from St Mark's Church, but I'm chairing tonight because this year I am chair of Church Together. And I have to say, when I took on the chair, you only do it for a year, I thought, I'm fine. There's not going to be an election. Shucks. So a very warm welcome to you. As Church Together, we're always privileged to be able to host these hustings, and it's brilliant that so many people are here tonight to engage with the debate. It can't have escaped your notice that midway through the election campaign, our country, in a sense, has been united by the awful events in Manchester. So before we get to the debate of tonight, to the discussion of tonight, I'd like to invite those of you who are able to stand as we just hold a moment of quiet in which you can pray or think, whatever is your way of doing things. But if we can hold a moment of quiet. Thank you very much. Would you like to take your seats?
Sorry.
I'd like to invite John Richardson now, who is Secretary of Church Together, to come and explain the ground rules for tonight's discussion.
Churches Together has been organising these sort of hustings for many years now, and it's always, as Jane said, a great privilege to do so. We aim to be fair to all the candidates and to you as voters, but it's no easy task, as you might imagine. There are 6 candidates, and we want to give an equal opportunity to them all. We asked for questions about 3 weeks ago, and got over 70. Even got one about 10 minutes ago, which mentioned Mr. Trump, would you believe? And they're all expressed with strong conviction. And we've reduced them. The chair and myself have gone through them, trying to group ones that there were quite a few about. Which has made us obviously popular with some people in the room and unpopular with a few others, so I'm sorry about that. We're going to follow this pattern. In a few moments, each candidate will be given 2.5 minutes to set out their vision and their policies. And we should be very strict. At 2 minutes, they will hear a sound. That's to wind up in 30 seconds. And at 2.5 minutes, it will go as loudly as we can. And they will be urged to sit down. And I'm grateful for the cooperation. When it comes to questions, we have various people who have been primed to ask questions, and they will ask them very briefly. They submitted them in good time. And then the candidates will have 1 minute to answer, if they wish to. They don't have to answer every question. And they'll be told to draw to a conclusion with 10 seconds to go. Now we hope this will work, and we hope there will be time for some more open debate on some of the issues. And Jane has been setting out some timetable, which we hope will work as we go through the evening. But we will be very firm. Jane Mainwaring is my vicar. She has a very friendly face. She's a wonderful vicar. She's also quite tough. And she will be very firm with anybody who crosses her. All right? One last thing. The main aim of this evening is to hear the views of candidates and to express the concerns of voters. We hope our strict timing will help that. But we also want to do the whole evening with respect. We will all, I hope, listen and engage with the discussion ourselves. I'm sure there never has been any personal abuse. I hope there will be no shouting down. Modest expressions of applause are very nice from time to time. And if you're really upset, do a sort of mild hiss. That works, and we can listen above you rather than jeering. Thank you for your cooperation on that. There is one other thing. We are being filmed tonight by HitchinTV, and we're very glad to them for doing it, and to the person who has offered the money to cover that cost anonymously. We're very grateful indeed. Only the candidates and the chair will be on the film. Questioners will be heard and their names will be mentioned, but they've all given consent to that. But you will not be in the film. Sorry about that, but we can't take the risk that some people might not want to be, or might pull faces and so on. So, I keep saying finally, I just forgot one other thing. The exits are clearly marked. Please go to them in the event of an emergency. There are no fire alarms planned. If you hear one, it's for real. Thank you very much for your help.
We have the windows open at the back.
Oh, sorry? Oh, yeah, turn off your mobiles. Oh, I assume you're such a well-behaved lot, you do that instinctively. Because you're all theatre goers, you know. Yes, turn off your mobiles. Thank you. Oh, here they go, here they go. I think that's it. Any quick questions about the format? Good.
Thank you very much, John. So we come to the introductions of our candidates. So on my left here we have Ray Blake, who is standing as an independent. Then we have Richard Cano, who is standing for the Green Party. John Hayes for the Labour Party. Sid Goebel for the Christian People's Alliance. Bim Afolami. I have a real problem with names. Afolami, thank you very much, Bim, and I apologise, for the Conservatives. And Hugh Annand, is that right? Yeah. Brilliant, for the Liberal Democrats. I'm going to ask each of them in turn to present their case in 2.5 minutes. And we're going to begin with Hugh at the end.
Well, thank you, Jane. I suspect you weren't the only one who thought they were okay this year, there wouldn't be an election. But here we are. And here I am, seated to the right of the Conservatives, which probably confirms the suspicions of Labour supporters in the audience. Anyway, it's great to see so many of you here this evening, back in Hitchin, one of my childhood stamping grounds. Much has been made of my place of residence, but such are the twists and turns of fate that life delivers to us. I, at one stage, very nearly bought a house in Sandwich, which is in the constituency, but somebody beat me to it. At another stage, I very nearly bought a house in Wheatonstead, which is also in the constituency, but on that occasion, the friend that I was buying with couldn't get a mortgage, and the whole thing fell through, and then life moved on, and I ended up elsewhere, as you know. So that's a little bit about me, a little bit about what drives me. What drove me to politics can be summed up in one word, and that's my sense of justice. Okay, it's 4 words, but justice is one word. And that's in the broadest sense. I think it's important that we have a criminal and civil justice system that works properly. I think it's important that the state has a role in ensuring justice for future generations in terms of looking after our environment, between generations, making sure that we have a decent start in life for our young people and a dignified end to life for very elderly, and that those in between are also proportionately looked after, and so on and so forth. It was that strong sense of justice that got me involved in politics at quite a young age, and I joined the Liberal Democrats in 2001. And I was saying to Sid earlier, the other thing that drives me is my Christian faith. And the reason I'm a liberal is that I think, You don't need an overbearing state that takes the place of God, but we do have, as Christians, a duty to protect the most vulnerable. Finally, and very briefly, this election is about our future relationship with the European Union. I know from first hand the benefits of free movement. I don't want future generations to be denied the opportunity that I had as a young man, and that is why I'm here and want to give the rich people
Thank you very much.
say in the final deal. Thank you.
Bim, if I can invite you to take the stand.
Great, well, thank you very much. My name is Bim Afolami. I am the Conservative Party candidate for Hitchin and Harpenden, and that's why I'm here in front of you this evening. I thought I'd just give you just a little bit about me, who I am, where I come from, and what experience I think makes me qualified and able to potentially be your Member of Parliament if elected next week. So a little bit about me. I grew up with the NHS. My father's a doctor actually in St Albans, West Hertfordshire Trust. My mother is a pharmacist. My grandfather actually was an Anglican vicar, and that was how he ended up coming to this country, how my father's family ended up coming to this country from Nigeria. My mother is British and was born here. I studied history at Oxford University. I went on to be a lawyer, where I advised in the city, advising companies on various corporate actions, mergers, acquisitions, takeovers, various things in the city and the stock market. I then, after a few years doing that and my legal training, I then moved to HSBC, where I was until about 3 weeks ago, where I was a senior executive working on strategy and corporate restructuring, and in particular, improving our relationship with small and medium-sized businesses and making sure that HSBC, one of the world's biggest banks, is no longer too big to fail. And as part of that role, and in addition to it, I have been advisor to several small and medium-sized businesses. My wife Hetty, who is here somewhere, I think, she runs a small business with her father, employs 4 people. That's given me a great experience. In addition, we've got 2 little boys, Zach and Sam, and they're not running businesses, but they run around a lot, and that has also been a real experience for me that I think has given me something of value. And just to finish off, I'd just like to say why I'm here, why I'm in politics. I think I can sum that up in one word. I'll try one word, which is opportunity. That's opportunity for everybody, not just for everybody to be okay, not just for everybody to be fine or to avoid destitution, but opportunity for everybody to succeed, opportunity for everybody to thrive. I know I've been very lucky in my life. I want to give back to my country. That's why I'm in politics. Thank you very much.
I'd like to invite Sid now to introduce himself.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Well, I'm for my sins, the leader of the Christian People's Alliance. You haven't had a Christian People's Alliance candidate here in Hitchin before, but I've stood in the last 6, or I stood in 6 general elections. This is my 6th. I've stood 3 times in Sheffield, twice in London, and I'm now standing here because I live in Hitchin, which I didn't used to. And I'm very committed to this community. I live on Westmill Road. I have a stepson who goes to Hitchin Boys' School. I recently stood to be a parent governor of the school, and I'm very committed to this community. Now, the core values that we stand for are the fact that we believe there needs to be some compassion in our society. You see, we as Christians run food banks. My wife and I help to run a food bank, and because we run food banks, we know why people go, and we've got policies which no other party's got, which can actually solve the problem as to why they go. Now, the policy is that we will give benefits to people the day they apply for them, so no one is left waiting for a response from government. At the moment, it's sometimes as many as 13 weeks from applying for benefits to actually getting anything. and nobody would be taken off benefits unless they had an alternative source of income, because that's another reason why people go to food banks, because of benefit sanctions, and we would make that a thing of the past. Now, we believe that because we've got that compassion, and we're doing it already, we actually deserve to be in government doing it more. And one other thing which I find incredible is the fact that when people come out of prison, the reoffending rate is between 50 and 60%. Now, one of those reasons for that is because people that come out of prison with nowhere to go are just left on the streets. Probation is completely useless. They say, we're not a housing organisation, all we can do is pass people to local authorities. Now, where Christians have actually got hold of this, in places like Stoke and Manchester, for instance, there's Saltbox in Stoke, there's the Message Trust in Manchester, they are making sure that no one comes out of prison with nowhere to go. And they've got the reoffending rate down to 10%. Now, if we can do that on a voluntary basis, wouldn't it be much better if you had Christians running this country and doing it on a national basis and solving some of this problem and reducing this reoffending rate? Because this is only about victims, which are then armed, robbed or whatever. It's also about the people themselves who can have their lives changed.
Thank you. John, over to you.
Good evening, my name is John Hayes. I am proud to say that I'm the Labour Party candidate for this constituency, and I am local. I live in Chesfield Ward, and I have done for the last 8 years. My whole family, we are invested in this community. My wife, Lisa, is a head teacher at an excellent Hitchin primary school. My son Tom, currently at Leicester Uni, now massively in debt, as you'll understand. My daughter Jess, sixth form at our local comprehensive. And I am a full-time primary head teacher. I haven't been able to take any leave during this campaign at all because I have a very large school to run at the same time in Camden. My own education and that of my family, I'm proud to say we are all the product of state comprehensive schools. My reasons for standing in this election are very personal ones. Over the years, I have become more and more aware of the ever-widening divisions in our society. But I still retain a vision and a hope for our country, one that's fair, welcoming, inclusive, caring, a country with a proud history of standing up for others when they can't stand up for themselves. But increasingly, I'm seeing and experiencing something different. I've always had an abiding faith in our welfare state. As a head teacher, I'm experiencing the damage that the cuts to education have already caused and will get so much worse. Parents of children in my school in overcrowded, poor quality accommodation that they can't afford, and they frequently resort to food banks. The number of mums who come to our breakfast club and at the end come up and say, have you got anything spare that I could take home for lunch? It is criminal. Families from EU countries living, working, contributing to UK society, now living in fear of their future. And the experience of my relatives. A family member suffering from early onset Alzheimer's, who for months was denied the care she was so desperately needed, putting untold strain on her husband. My nephew, an NHS consultant, striving to do the job that he wants to do in a hospital struggling to manage with underfunding. My son embarking on a career with the Metropolitan Police. Lack of officers and resources making his job, and him personally, so much more dangerous. My daughter with aspirations to work in social care. The daily encounter and frustration of an undervalued and under-resourced service that simply cannot keep with the need. But my campaign is focused on I wish to be an effective local representative for this constituency.
Thank you
Thank you very much.
Richard.
Okay, good evening. I'm Richard Cano. I represent the Green Party. I am the most local candidate for selection here. I was born in Hitchin. I live in Hitchin. I have 3 children that attend local schools here. I have a wife who works for the NHS, and she works in Stevenage at Lister Hospital. And I work for education. I'm head teacher of Purwell Primary School in town. So, seeing the government cuts on these important services, I see it at first hand, at home. I have a strong personal investment in the welfare and prosperity of this part of Hertfordshire. I will ensure that I represent both towns and ensure I work hard to ensure that the main concerns raised in both towns are met. Some of the things locally we need to address at the moment. We need to have a solution to the ongoing saga of Churchgate in town. We've also, because that's 2.5 decades we've been living with this, people have also told us on the doorstep that they would like to have direct access onto the London-bound platform at Hitchin Station on the north side of Cambridge Road Bridge via St Michael's Mount. We want to see a return of the dog waste bins in both towns because the streets are getting more and more filthy. And of course we need to address the concern of lack of school places as well. That's a big thing for young families. Nationally, the Green Party makes several pledges. The first one is we want to see proper controls for rents for those people who are renting homes. We also need to see an abolition of the student tuition fees. We also need to make sure that climate change remains high on the agenda, both nationally and internationally. We want an NHS and schools that are properly funded through a fair share tax system. And also, we want to ensure that the savage sport of fox hunting is banned for good. And finally, there are 6% of the population are identify themselves as LGBT. We need to ensure that they have a voice and they have the respect they deserve. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Ray Blake, and I'm also local. Me and my family live in Ickleford. I'm a parish councillor in Ickleford, and I, like some of the candidates here, was not expecting an election this year, but I was considering this in 3 years' time. So this has been a little bit of a rush for me to bring myself into this process, and because of my late entry, I think some people were perhaps a little sceptical of why I've joined to become a candidate. My main driver becoming a candidate was that I received a letter from our local schools signed by 6 head teachers, and being a parent with 3 children in local schools, it made me concerned about school funding. So my initial thought was to stand on one issue only, but as I found with this process, as soon as you stand, everybody wants to know what you think about everything. So schools was my reason for standing, and I feel that schools have just had enough of the cuts, and we need to get more money into schools. I met with the head teacher at the primary school very recently, and he concerned me that, his concerns were that they are running out of money, and both the single-sex schools in Hitchin are also in a dire state. We do need to get money into schools, and when other politicians talk about opportunity, then I worry that they don't look at the schools for where opportunity will come from. So if we talk about opportunity in business all the time and neglect our schools, how will we drive opportunity from our young people? That is a concern for me. So we've got the money, there's plenty of money there, but I don't know if we're really sure where the money's going. I've done calculations already, and there's plenty of money in the system to fund our schools, fund our national health. I'm a financial advisor, I've got a calculator, it's very easy to work out, but for some reason this government, who forget it's our money that they're spending, talk about austerity all the time, and I'm sure they must get to a state where they realise they can't keep cutting and cutting and cutting, and all they seem to do is talk about austerity and we have to grow the economy. Then they talk about the national debt going down, it keeps going up. So why not spend money on things that people want to spend money on? Our schools, our education, our NHS, and let's do what's right for this country. We are the 5th largest economy in the world, and it doesn't feel like it when you go to our schools and our hospitals. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ray. We're going to turn now to the first of our questions for this evening, and I'm going to ask John Richardson to ask this question on behalf of a number of people.
And this question, we're not setting a limit, we are setting a limit. It's a couple of sentences only, this one. We're not timing this one. These were the first questions I got, and they're mainly over the phone or in conversation. Why are we having this election? Or sometimes, why on earth are we having this election? Or sometimes, why?
Hugh, can I ask you to respond first?
Yes, with pleasure, because Theresa May is a political opportunist and she thought that she would, by calling an election now, she would get a landslide. The polls are looking a bit unfavourable, so let's prove her wrong.
Bim, if I can ask you next to respond.
The Prime Minister called this election because in the midst of Brexit negotiations, which are possibly the toughest thing this country's had to do in the last 50 years, she needed a strong parliamentary support behind her, and as a result, wanted her own mandate to go into those negotiations.
Thank you, Bim. Sid.
Yeah, as things stood before, there were a number of MPs who were against the Prime Minister, led by Kenneth Clarke or one or two others that were supporting it. And the way things were, the negotiations were going to finish around about 2019. The general election was going to be 2020. They were going to finish just before there was going to be a general election, which would have put her in a very difficult political position. And the fact she's called an election now, which means the next general election will be earmarked for 2022, puts her in a much stronger position.
Thank you, Sid. John.
Short answer, political opportunism. She knows that the Brexit negotiations are going to go disastrously badly, given her current attitude toward the outcome. We, as a country, are going to end up in a real mess. She knows that if she waited till the right time for the election, she would suffer a crushing defeat. Very sensible to go now, because she thinks that the opposition is weak. I think this is yet another miscalculation, a U-turn too far, but actually I'm delighted because it's given us in the Labour Party the opportunity to show you that things can be better, and now you can actually vote for it.
I think quite simply the Conservatives have called the election now because they fully expect to win. This will give them 5 years to inflict the most savage cuts to public services that we've ever seen in Britain, and picking out the most weak and powerless on our society who will suffer the most, whilst allowing the most wealthy and large corporations an easy ride. That's why the election has been called.
I think 2 words sum it up: vanity and, what's the best word to use? Arrogance.
Our next question again is a short answer question and is from Emily Smith.
16 and 17-year-olds were allowed to vote in the 2014 Scottish referendum. Isn't it about time that we should be allowed to vote in UK general elections?
Bim, if I could ask you to kick us off on this one, please.
No, I'm afraid I don't think so. I think that the current rules are adequate. It's worth remembering that there's only one country in the EU that allows people to vote at 16, and there are very few countries internationally in modern democracies that allow that. So I don't think it's adequate. 18 is pretty much the international standard, and I think there are no problems with it as it is.
Thank you, Bim. Sid.
I've spoken to a number of 16, 17-year-olds on the doorstep, and no one's actually said to me, we're desperate to vote. And the youth parliament that is pushing this actually said to them, can you please tell me to what extent are Christian views represented in the youth parliament? And I got an extremely rude response. So I'm by no means convinced that 16, 17-year-olds are ready to look objectively at the issues.
Go on.
Okay, so the question is, can you vote at 16? Yes, absolutely, of course you can. You can get married, you can register for a civil partnership, you can have sex, You can join the armed forces and die for your country. You can leave home. You can consent to your own medical treatment, but you can't vote. That's ridiculous. So you should have a say. You have a say in all of that. So yes, you should absolutely must have the vote.
Thank you. Richard.
Okay, the Green Party manifesto would say yes, we would have 16 and 17-year-olds voting. It is your future at the end of the day. Of course, there are some 16 and 17-year-olds who can't even tidy their bedroom and keep that clean. But they'll probably stay in bed on the days that it's voting time, so they won't get the vote. But lots of young people have a strong interest in current affairs, nationally and internationally, even more than some of the other people at the other end of the spectrum, the age spectrum perhaps. So I would say yes. Unfortunately, the government have declared war on young people. They've taken away your education funding. They're cutting housing benefit, so it's less easy for you to get to the property ladder. They've increased tuition fees, so you'll be paying off for your education into your 20s and 30s. And then the government, represented by Mr. Afolami, is not funding you, and it's not funding Britain's future.
Okay, well, I don't have a party manifesto to refer to, so what I did is I've got a 17-year-old at home, and we had a conversation. And she said to me she's very interested in politics, since her father, in the last month, has got into politics. Now, I think the question coming from Emily is great. I think younger people should get into politics, and my view would perhaps be that if our schools had a bit more money, and they taught politics as they got to, say, 14, 15, then by the time they're 16, they've got a voice, and they should be voting.
And Hugh.
Well, so to John's list, I would add you can pay tax when you're 16. No taxation without representation. So the answer is yes.
Thank you, everybody, very much. We're moving on now to our questions where our candidates will each be given a minute to speak on the theme. And our first question is on education funding, as from Laura Cole.
As a secondary school teacher, primary school governor and parent in Hitchin, I'd really like to know what each party will do to ensure that funding for schools will ensure that the schools that have already made huge cuts will be able to function without a deficit budget. At present, many schools are having to cut teaching assistants, subjects and increase class sizes. How will you ensure that every school is funded appropriately?
Thank you, Laura. I can turn to Sid first to answer this question.
Okay, yeah, the situation is absolutely appalling. At the moment, what schools are getting are standstill budgets in money terms. So there's no increase available for increasing staff wages, which are natural increments. I mean, plus then you've got the increments of every member of staff as they have a year's more experience are entitled to a higher salary. There's no increase allowed for gas and electricity and these sort of prices for schools. So every year, the school budget is effectively reduced. And I understand this because I've been a chair of governors and I've also been chair of a finance committee, so I understand exactly how school finance works. And what schools are being told to do at the moment is completely and totally unacceptable. And our policy is to have stability in education. So we want to forget all this, introduce grammar schools, introduce academies and all this sort of stuff, which the Conservative Party is spending the money that should be spent on all schools, on these specific schools. And of course the Labour Party come in and then they get rid of them all and they have comprehensive education, so they change the school systems. Some changes, like introducing national curriculum, are needed.
Thank you. John.
Okay, so at the moment, the only way to function without a deficit budget is to sack staff. Staff make up 80 to 85% of overall school budgets, so when it really starts to squeeze, that's the only thing that's left to do, and that is a terrible thing. It leads to redundancies, it leads to us stopping buying important services and resources, it narrows the curriculum, and it reduces the quality of education that all the children deserve. So, the Labour Party, we're really clear about this. We have a properly, fully costed manifesto. We will spend 6.3 billion to put back the losses that schools have had to suffer because of the funding formula. We need a better funding formula that doesn't penalise any school or community. We'll spend a further 5.3 billion on childcare provision, early years and Sure Start. The money will have to come from somewhere. We have to take it from a range of tax measures, including the increased taxation for the top 5% of earners, and legislate to close those tax loopholes that nobody at the moment seems prepared to close to generate a further 6.5 billion. That's how we'll pay for it.
Okay, as a head teacher, obviously this is close to my heart. There are a number of head teachers in the room at the moment, and some teachers as well, as we've heard from Laura. So let's look at 3 years. Now, the cut started last year. Now, that would have eaten into the savings that schools made for big projects in their school, maybe a new roof, expansion to the school, refurbishment of toilets, playgrounds, etc. Okay, this year, that bite is much harder. We're losing support staff from schools. The curriculum has been cut. We're losing PE, the arts and music from some schools, and the pastoral care is also seriously affected. Now, don't forget, these are people who represent the victims of bullying within schools, and also those children who are young people who are LGTB, who are going through a very difficult time of their life. They're there to support them. Okay, next year the cuts continue, and we will have even further cuts, and that will be when we'll lose the best, most experienced teachers, who are the expensive ones. Assistant head teachers will go, and repairs and maintenance will be dropped. Schools become more dangerous for our children.
Thank you, Laura, for your question. My concern is that we have a Conservative government that have just said they will release some more money, but we have to wait until 2022, maybe around that time, and they might give us £4 billion of our money. But what are they going to do? They said, well, what we do, we'll steal the lunches from some of our children, and we'll give them 7 pence per morning for breakfast. I'm not quite sure yet what you can buy for 7 pence. It wouldn't go far in my house. And then they're saying they're putting more money into schools. Now, my concern is that I spoke to a head teacher recently that said the local council said, here's £500,000 to extend your car park. So they spend that money, very nice, everyone can park in the car park. But now next year, they have to start sacking staff because they're running out of money. So we just need to find the money. There's lots of money in the system. I'm a financial advisor. There's pension tax relief that rewards the rich. There's £40 billion there. Let's take the money from the rich pensioners and put it into schools as well.
Hugh.
Yeah, we've got an extra 5.7 billion earmarked for education, which will preserve school budgets in real terms and hopefully give a slight real terms increase, but certainly a significant boost in cash terms. We want to make sure that money is properly targeted to the schools that, so the schools that need it most get the most, and we will avoid wasting money on things like mucking around with the school system, grammar schools, academies, free schools and so on, and on the terribly wasteful PFI that we have inherited from past Conservative and Labour governments, where school buildings are costing more than they should, and the money that should be spent on education is going into the hands of property developers.
Right, so I think it's important that first of all we understand the full context of what we're talking about with school funding. Since the mid-90s, school funding per pupil in real terms, so that's after inflation, has more than doubled, both in primary and secondary schools. So, where are we now? In the context of not just that doubling of school funding, which is the most sustained growth of any area of government expenditure other than the NHS over the last 20 years, in that context, we know about lots of other pressures on the government budget. We will talk about many of them tonight. In that context, the government is still, with the deficit and other pressures on the government budget, the government is still protecting school funding and is going to, over the next few years...
Can you let people speak, please?
The government is still protecting school funding, but...
people when they're speaking. There will be, if we don't have to interrupt, there will be time for questions and comments from the floor. Thank you.
But there is one area in which I agree with, and I forget which of my fellow panellists made this point, around the new school funding formula. The government is consulting again on that school funding formula. If elected to be your Member of Parliament, I will work with the schools, with local councils, to make sure that our schools in this constituency get a good deal from that school funding formula. You can trust me on that.
We have a couple of minutes, literally a couple of minutes for short comments. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise your hand. Gentleman over there, please. You're going to make John run.
Hi, my name is Bal Sandhu. I'm actually on the management committee of the Hitchin, Edgeworth and Cordle Food Bank. I'm also chairman of the North Arts Interfaith Forum. I have to correct the previous speaker on a completely spurious figure. Since the mid-90s, school funding has doubled in real terms. Yes, after Labour invested huge amounts right? We need social cohesion, and that can only happen with investment in school places, school kids, teachers, and the resources. That's real opportunity.
Thank you.
I'd very much like to invite Bim to my school, local school, where I'm a head teacher, and explain to my parents and my children and my staff how you are protecting, as a Tory party, funding for schools, and explain why I'm having to let staff go and cut back on resources and cut back on the improvements I need to do with my schools. So if that's protecting education, I think you need to go back and have another look.
Right at the back there. Sorry, I'm going to make you all John. Let's get the final comment on this topic.
Sorry, just on the fairer funding formula. So the fairer funding formula is aimed to solve inequalities, like the fact that some state schools get £7,000, some state schools get £5,000. But when it comes to far more serious inequalities, like a school on £7,000 and a school like, say, Eton College on £50,000, the Conservative, which I know you know very well, the Conservative Party goes suddenly quiet. The Labour Party will place a VAT tax, a tax on luxuries, on schools with boat houses, wine cellars and horse riding and PE. Why aren't you talking about that?
This question was asked by more people than anybody else, than anything else. The next one follows.
So the next question, we move from one very heated debate to another, to the NHS. And here we go. So John is going to ask one.
I'm just representing quite a few early questions, again, mainly by phone or text. Very simple. How will you fund an even better National Health Service?
Thank you. Can we start with John?
Okay, let's start by saying let's not have anyone in the room deny that the NHS is in crisis. No matter what the amount of money the government tells us has been pumped into the NHS, we know different. We know Jeremy Hunt is slashing vital NHS services, and the one he's not slashing, he's selling off to the highest private bidder. When a senior orthopaedic surgeon told my wife a few weeks ago, and I quote, "We wish we could do more for you, but you do realise that the NHS is in crisis, don't you?" Then that's the day that I finally decided to stand for Parliament and do something about it myself. If we value our NHS, then we have to be prepared to pay for it. Labour Party, we plan to spend an extra 30 billion over the next Parliament. Where are we going to get it from? Restoring the Tory cuts in corporation tax, income tax increases, I will pay more, excessive pay levy, and countering tax avoidance. That's how we're going to put the money in. We have to save the NHS from the Tories.
I did mention earlier that my wife is a midwife at Lister Hospital. She works nights, and sometimes they are so seriously understaffed that she'll come home and she's in tears because she's been looking after five mothers with just 2 or 3 members of staff, and she cares about her job, but that's the situation it's in. Now, we used to have the most effective and efficient health service in the world, but continuous Conservative cuts have left it on its knees. Last winter in Worcestershire Hospital, 2 ladies died on trolleys in the corridor at a hospital, waiting 35 hours to be seen by a doctor. This is not a unique situation. This is happening up and down the country, and it's not acceptable. What we need to do is invest more in the NHS to bring it back to where it was, the envy of the world.
Thank you. I've got a feeling there might be 5 of us on a panel that are all agreed and perhaps 1 in denial tonight. As I said earlier, I'm a financial advisor and I don't have all these horror stories to talk about. All I know is the NHS is valued by everyone in this room, but it is just about money. They talk about a top-down change, they talk about let's do this, let's change this. Why can't we just ask the doctors what they need, ask them how much money they need, how much they need in resources. If you trust someone like the Trussell Trust, they say to us, this is what you need to put in the NHS. Let's not trust the government, who don't have a clue about running the NHS, and let's ask these professionals, how much money would you like to go into the NHS? I know they're always going to ask for more money, but I think the people in this room would say, let's put as much money in as it needs, because we'll always need to put more money in the NHS. We need to spend, I'm very close on Labour on here, we need to spend a lot of money in the next 5 years, and probably around 6 billion per year will get us to where we should be. All we need to do is find £30 billion. That's not a lot to ask for all the money that we have. Thank
you. Hugh.
Yeah, I think the NHS is still a very efficient healthcare system and should be preserved and cherished. There are issues not just in hospitals, it's with access to primary care, people not being able to get GP appointments at all in some cases. And yes, the other issues have already been raised. So that's why we want to put a penny on income tax to put more money into the NHS. We are open and honest about that. Also, by legalising cannabis, we will take the revenue from that out of the hands of organised criminals and raise an extra £1 billion that can be put into actually looking after people rather than criminalising them. And that will enable us to invest in mental health, which for far too long has been the Cinderella of the NHS and is something that is desperately needed. And again, hospitals suffer from the same thing as schools, which is these terribly wasteful PFI schemes where money is going to financiers that should be going to patients.
Thank you.
Right, so just to address a couple of things that have been said. I think what Hugh mentioned about PFI schemes, there's something in that, and I think that a lot of the PFI schemes entered into by the new Labour government have meant that things are costing more for the NHS at this time. I think going back to what John was saying about, or rather, forgive me, it was Ray talking about give the NHS what it needs. So Simon Stevens, who's head of the NHS England, he asked the government for an extra £8 billion, and he believes that that's a plan that, under his plan, he believes that that will be sufficient for the NHS. That is what the government, the Conservative government, has proposed in its manifesto. But, and I'm not immune or in denial at all. As I said at the beginning, my father's an NHS doctor, my mother's a pharmacist. I grew up with the NHS. It's the only thing that I've ever known as them since I was a child. There is definitely a case to look for getting increased funding into the NHS. But what we must do, and I just urge all of you to think about this, we must consider where that comes from in a sustainable way.
Yeah, absolutely. The NHS needs more money, and we have a policy which is introducing a turnover tax, which companies like Google and Facebook and Starbucks and Amazon that don't pay tax at the moment would pay. and there's no other party that's actually got a policy to make these people pay tax and we can put that money into the NHS. But there is one party that's got a serious problem with the NHS, and that's the party that is saying we can only have NHS employees working in the NHS. You see, at the moment, we've got private companies that are doing the linen very efficiently, doing the meals very efficiently, cleaning hospitals very efficiently, servicing equipment very efficiently, buying equipment very efficiently. As has been said, it works very efficiently. Now, we've got to run the NHS efficiently. If we throw out all the efficiency of the NHS and say in future only NHS employees are going to be working in hospitals, it will be a disaster. The Labour Party will throw the NHS into total chaos if they're elected. Thank you.
We have a couple of minutes for comments from the floor or questions. Lady at the back there. Run.
Hey, I'm too old for this. Yeah.
There's a big issue in the NHS, which I think only one person's actually mentioned, but I'd like to raise, and that's parity of esteem for mental health within the NHS. It affects 1 in 4 adults in this country, and it affects 1 in 10 children. In every classroom, that's 3 children. And with the schools and the pressures that they're under, I'm sure that's actually an underestimate. And I think that's something that needs to be thought about in this area. I have not had good experiences of the mental health system locally.
Got a gentleman there, and then a gentleman at the back.
A number of panellists believe, or so I understand, that freedom of movement within the continent of Europe should come to an end soon. How do they square that with the fact that the NHS is extremely reliant on many fantastic staff who are themselves European citizens?
I'm not going to give candidates an opportunity to answer that at the moment because we have got a question on that later on, but we've taken the point, and there is a gentleman at the back in the sort of the doorway. Final comment on this debate.
Just quickly, I'm a third-year student paediatric nurse. I'm due to qualify in about 9 weeks. And for a lot of my classmates, for a lot of the junior doctors, the medical students that are coming to qualify, we are terrified, concerned about the service that we're moving into. You know, that we can't deliver the sort of care that we want to deliver because the funding and the support isn't there. We've got a Secretary of State for Health that is used the last 7 years to demoralise, to dehumanise, to destroy, you know, the workers that are currently supporting the NHS. And I'm not sure where we're going, but at the moment I don't hold very high hopes for the vocation that I've trained for 3 years to do.
We're going to move on now to our next topic, which is the topic of housing, and I'd like to invite Daniel Keegren to give us his question. Are you ready, Daniel? Yep. Yeah, thank you.
Hi there all. Given that in the constituency, house prices are ranging in Hitchin from double the national average to in Harpenden nearly treble the national average, what would you do to ensure young families and young people from the area are not forced to leave, as so many are currently being?
Thank you, Daniel. Richard, can I ask you to answer that one first for us today?
Okay, the Green Party want to create affordable housing and more social housing across the country. We need to allow young people the opportunity to leave home at an early age and be able to get on that first rung of the property ladder to start their lives and their independence. We also need to ensure that proper rent controls are in place and that landlords aren't increasing their rents to unaffordable levels. Don't forget, we do also have a situation where we've got so many homeless in the country as well. That's not been mentioned up to now. This is one of the concerns that we have. The Conservative government see the world through profit making and money, and unfortunately, when you put people before profits, that's going to happen. We should ensure there's enough housing for the young people, enough social housing for everybody.
Thank you, Richard.
I'd agree with a lot of what Richard said there. Until recently, I, as part of my financial planning role, was giving mortgage advice to people, and I've seen over the last 5 years how difficult it is for anybody to get on the housing ladder. These people have been brought up with the aspiration to buy a house, and it's about their independence, and they want to leave home. And I remember people used to leave home perhaps in their 20, 21, 22, early 20s, and now I'm meeting people who are into their 30s, who they get on well with their mum and dad, but they say, I've really got to move out. And they are struggling to find the money, and unless they've got rich parents who can give them a nice deposit, they can't get on the housing ladder. So I think the housing supply needs to be addressed. We do need to build more houses, but dare I say it, we can do that without building on the greenbelt. There's plenty of horrible brownfield sites that we can build houses on. We can bring them up to a good level. We can think about capping landlords who are just profiteering from vulnerable people when they want to rent. And if someone wants to rent, then let them have a rental tenancy that perhaps is the German model, where they can have that tenancy for most of their life. And most people live in fear of a 6-month tenancy.
Hugh.
Yeah, we have lots of policy on this, but I only have a minute. So perhaps the two most important points. One is that we want to empower local authorities to build new social housing, rather than paying millions of pounds, 3.2 million in the case of one landlord in Watford, in housing benefit into the pockets of a rich landlord. Invest in social housing. That will have a knock-on effect on the wider market. And the second one is to build 10 new garden cities. One of which, the last time I looked, was planned for near Ashwell, where you have good infrastructure in terms of it has an existing railway line, which is a railway station which is underutilised, and making sure that housing is coordinated with other infrastructure, including schools and other services.
Thank you. Bim.
Yes, in fact, I agree with quite a lot of what's been said. I think first, what was said about rental tenancies, I think it's important we get longer tenancies for renting, because that just gives families stability over a longer period of time, and that I think is a good thing, and I would do anything if elected to try and do that. But to address the question more directly on how is it that we can stop local people being priced out. Now this is a tricky one, because Hitchin's a wonderful place and lots of people want to move here from all over the country, in particular London. What I would say is it's not just building more houses, it's about the type of houses that are built. Not just big detached sort of 4 or 5 bedroom houses which generate the most money, but we need 1 bedroom houses, 2 bedroom houses, 3 bedroom houses, and yes, more social housing to provide that mix of housing which should then allow more people, especially when they're younger, to get on the property ladder.
Yeah, I've sat on a council planning committee and I understand planning, and we can't just build houses willy-nilly without having the infrastructure in place. And the reality is, it's okay building in Hitchin at the centre of the town if there's space there, but if you build on the fringes of Hitchin, sorry, but the roads just aren't good enough. The roads are already completely clogged up. Stevenage, by contrast, I mean, there's lots of dual carriageways built, there's a better railway line into the centre of London from Stevenage. There is the infrastructure in place in Stevenage to build a lot more houses, and it actually makes sense. You've got to build where the infrastructure is in place. And I know that it may be a problem for people that want to buy a cheap house in Stevenage, but I'm sorry, we can't destroy Hitchin Town, but we can't destroy Hitchin Town and the beauty of Hitchin Town and what we have here by just building more houses on the edge. Well, you tell me, in the morning, are the roads clogged up coming into Hitchin? I mean, well, you tell me, okay, build a whole load more houses on the edge of Hitchin, and what's going to happen? I mean, is it going to... We've got to have the infrastructure. It's as simple as that.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Daniel, I'm going to endeavour to actually answer your question. Yeah, miraculous, I know. Here we go. What we propose to do, I'm not going to go through all the statistics, you know how dreadful things are. I think I'm going to disagree with Bim entirely. It's not tricky to provide local housing for local people. You just have to have a will to do it. We are going to put in place a housing ministry to improve the number of standard of affordable homes. We want to invest over provide over 1 million new homes, building 100,000 council and housing association homes that people can access as soon as possible. But we do need to build better, sustainable, environmentally friendly homes. And it's within our manifesto, we actually use the phrase to provide first-time buyers, local people, first dibs at those properties. These are not going to be sold off as buy-to-lets. These are not going to go into the private sector immediately and then get charged a ridiculous rent. These are going to be local, affordable homes for local people. Thank you very much.
Again, we have a couple of minutes for any other comments on this topic of housing. If you're on the balcony and do want to join in, please feel free, provided you can shout. Anybody want to make any comments or questions on this topic? Oh, yep, lady in the balcony. Would you like to stand up and shout? Sorry, we can't hear.
Yes, I do agree that housing should be environmentally sound because we shouldn't be building any more problems for the future. There is already quite a large amount of houses that are insulated enough and are too expensive to run. Building any more houses for the future should be zero carbon houses, cheap to run, not cheap to build. But what I'm also concerned is that the UK has got the smallest rooms in the houses that they build across Europe. If you go anywhere in the world in Europe, and the houses, rooms are livable rooms, they are not rabbit hutches. Low ceilings, small rooms oppress people, and I'm sure that that's part of what has caused a lot of mental health problems in our population. Let's have a minimum standard of a size of room per house that is comfortable to live in and that is fit for human habitation.
Thank you very much.
Homes should be to live in. They're not investments from foreign investors from the likes of Russia, Saudi, Hong Kong, China, and the super rich, blowing up the London property market and making it hellish for everybody else outside in the countryside.
Thank you. Final comment. Oh, that's the next question. Lovely, thank you very much. Okay, we're moving on now to our next topic, which is food banks. And I'd like to invite Anton to share his questions.
Thank you. The Trust of Trust estimates the number of users of its food banks to be well over 500,000. Considering the Trust provides roughly half the food banks in the UK, do you agree that over 1 million people using food banks in the world's 5th largest economy is a national disgrace? If elected, what would you do to reverse this appalling statistic?
Thank you. Ray, would you like to start us off with this?
I agree it's a disgrace. I think some people would say we're in austerity, so we can't look after these people, and we need to think about spending less money. Perhaps we need to look at ourselves as a nation and say, who do we need to look after? Why are people going to food banks? And should it not be part of someone's human rights to be able to get food and be looking after their family? I'm not quite sure what the answer is. I think other people around here will have a better idea of the solution. But I agree it's a disgrace. We are the 5th largest economy in the world. We shouldn't have homelessness. We shouldn't have people that have food poverty. I'm not quite sure what the answers are. Certainly taking away food from our children in our schools can't really help that as far as I can see. So going back to school lunches, school breakfasts, if people can't feed themselves at home, why not help to feed them in their schools, and then perhaps they'll learn better as well.
Thank you, Hugh.
And the short answer to the first part of the question is yes. The slightly longer answer, slightly longer answer is that I'm quite relaxed that there is a charitable sector that can step in where the state, where it's a bit too bureaucratic and inflexible. The point is that people are being looked after and they're getting the help that they need. The scale of the problem, that is a national disgrace, that you have that number of people who are relying on charity. What would I do about it? Two things. One is we want to end the sort of computer says no approach to public services and then reduce some of that bureaucracy and inflexibility so that people can get the help to which they're entitled from the state more quickly and more flexibly. And secondly, I'm quite attracted by the idea of a citizen's income, but the bell has rung and that's not my party policy just yet.
Thank you. Tim, would you like to
Yes, actually, I think I agree with some of that. I think, first of all, the computer says no approach to benefits, I think, is damaging. It causes unnecessary problems, and if elected, I'll really try and work on that. Other reasons that sometimes people are driven to food banks, the Trussell Trust has published this. One is difficulty with managing excessive debt. One way in which we try and deal with that is we need to clamp down further and harder on payday lenders. I think that's a disgrace, and I think we need to work on that. Secondly, rather than people go to payday lenders, let's try and increase the popularity of credit unions, which are a much more sustainable way for people when they're in acute financial difficulty. And just the third point, in one way in which we can help with this pretty awful situation, is mental health. A lot of the reason why people are in go to food banks is often through mental health problems. We need to keep that focus on and definitely improve that situation.
I've yet to find a Conservative candidate or Conservative Member of Parliament that has any understanding properly of why people are going to food banks and what the solutions are. It's interesting you mentioned mental health. One of the problems is that people with mental health have got disability payments. They're sent down to the doctor, and the doctor has to decide, is this person able to do any work? That's the government test, any work. We would get rid of that test, okay? Now, the doctor then says, yes, this person is able to do some work. The person with mental health problems is then sent to the job centre. The job centre then says, go for this interview. Because they've got mental health problems, they don't turn up at the interview. So they're then told, I'm sorry, your benefit's stopped, you haven't turned up for the interview. And it doesn't happen once, it happens once, twice. I know people it's happened 6 or 7 times too. Because they just simply aren't able to cope. And you've got no idea what you've got to do to prevent people going to food banks. I told you in my introduction what we had to do.
Thank you very much, Sid. Thank you.
Okay, there's a couple of things. Payday lenders, I think you better check with the rest of the Tory party before you start talking about people who run payday lending companies. Just to slip there. We are the 5th largest economy. Oxfam have said 2 million people in the UK are suffering right now from malnutrition. That's a disgrace. That's Tory Britain. Provision for 3-day emergency food supplies, the Trussell Trust's own statistics, 1.2 million last year. That's a rise of 41,000 since 2010. What happened in 2010, I wonder? At my school, we now give out food bank vouchers to parents. This is disgusting. Last week, on the streets of Harpenden, a Tory voter came up to me to explain that food banks, well, we all like to get something for nothing, don't we, he said. That's true. So, it's to do with universal credit payments taking up to 6 weeks, people with insecure work. I've got the rest of the answers, I haven't got time to give them to you.
Anton, I entirely agree with you. The fact we even have this discussion about food banks in Britain is a disgrace. It's a shame. Recently, Theresa May was quoted as saying, I believe work is the best route out of poverty. She used to check the facts that 67% of the 4 million children in poverty come from working families. Some of the people who are reaching out to the food banks are new teachers and young nurses. The idea of malnourished teachers teaching our children and nurses looking after sick doesn't bear thinking about. Now, we need to create money. We need to get after the tax evasion big corporations and the very wealthy to pay their share. Recently, Mr. Afolami, in a local interview, said, "I believe the current tax system is doing a pretty good job. He is clearly out of touch with society. He's out of touch with his constituency and the people he's supposed to be representing. It is the shame of the nation."
Any comments from the floor? Yep, lady over there.
Thank you. Bim, I may have misunderstood. Did you suggest that people were going to food banks because they couldn't manage their money or they had mental health issues? I find that really offensive. Like some of the candidates on the panel, I'm an assistant head at a local primary school. I'm giving out food vouchers every single day to parents. And these are parents in work. These are parents who work for our NHS. And I've had to actually give food bank vouchers to my colleagues. That's how bad the situation is. And I think you just grossly misunderstand it.
Thank you. My name's Ian Alba, one of the local councillors here. I really welcome Bim's commitment to credit unions and work on credit unions for the government. And I certainly welcome the fact everyone here should be a member of the Black Squirrel Credit Union. But what I would say is that the Conservative Party, your Conservative Party colleague, Bim, Dominic Raab, said just a few days ago at a question time, a bit like this, that people going to food banks aren't in poverty, they've got cash flow problems. That's the understanding that the Conservative Party has about food banks. That's why I'll be voting Labour at this election.
Is that their benefits have been interrupted. Exactly. Not that they are, and another reason is that they have long-term problems, and they get a shot at food bank thing from time to time, and it doesn't go on for 1 or 3 times. So 3 weeks they get, and that's it, and they have to come back in 6 months' time. But that's important to realise that the government is creating its own problems by not getting this benefit system sorted out, so that you don't get these interruptions and delays to the benefits being created.
Thank you very much. Final comment on this topic.
I'm a food bank volunteer as well, and 42% of the people using food banks do so because of cuts in benefit or sanctions, so that's the benefit system. And an interesting thing is that the use of food banks has gone up 6% in the last year, but in regions where there's been full rollout of universal credit, use has increased by 17%. So that's pretty direct evidence that the universal credit is increasing people's need for food banks.
Yeah. Thank you very much. We now move to some international issues, having focused very much on the national issues, and we come to a question on climate change from Craig Jameson.
Thank you. I'm not going to mention the T word. According to government figures, about 70% of people in the UK are concerned about climate change. What are your views on it, and what solutions do you propose?
Going to all the candidates that are muddling up the order, so we're not going to go straight along the line this time. But we are going to start with Hugh.
Well, I think the 70% are right to be concerned. Climate change is real. It is a very serious threat to our world and to our agriculture, to our way of life. What do we do about it? You have to have a whole raft of policies across a range of areas, including transport, making that more environment friendly. Housing, we've got far too many houses in this country that are still single glazed, poorly insulated, with inefficient heating systems. That's a terrible waste. Energy at source, investing in renewables. I'm very proud of the achievements of Liberal Democrats and the coalition government in boosting the share of renewables that we have, but we need to do much, much more than that. We also need to be honest about some forms of energy that were thought to be renewable or thought to be environment friendly, but aren't, such as biomass. But it's all in the manifesto. Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard. Okay, Green Party, this is an easy one. Okay, 1 minute, okay. Right, we do need to invest in renewable sources of energy. We need to phase out oil, coal and gas plants to create clean air and clean rivers, clean parks for everyone. Some excellent examples of from the continent, Spain, Portugal, Germany, Scandinavia, have got great systems in place where they create clean and secure energy systems on a massive scale, powering both businesses and homes. And I'll take my last few seconds of opportunity, because it's a current one, just to thank Mr. Afolami for turning up today, because that's more than Oliver Hill did for his hustings, and Stephen McPartland did his for his hustings, or his boss, who's missed 2 interviews on national television to become Prime Minister.
Okay, I'm totally in favour of recycling. I think we should have a national recycling scheme. I'm totally in favour of reducing pollution. Any way we can reduce pollution, the better. Electric cars, absolutely. I'm totally in favour of renewable energy. The more we can have wind power, solar panel, tidal power, whatever we have, the better. However, there is a move internationally to use this issue of climate change to create a one world government. And well, you can laugh at it if you like, but it's reality. We're not talking about something local, we're talking about something international. And the Liberal elite absolutely hate Donald Trump because he's going against the move to create a one world government. That move I do not support, we do not support. Absolutely, we want to live in a green world. Absolutely want to care for our environment. But the issue of climate change is being blown. The issue of climate change is being blown way out of all proportion.
Gosh, well, I don't think we're creating a one-world government, just please rest assured. I don't think that. What I do think is that 70% of people being worried about climate change that worries me, because I think that number should be 100%. So I think that all of us are in agreement here about climate change being very important, but I just leave you with 2 thoughts. One is we shouldn't forget about actually air pollution. Not just climate change, but air pollution in our cities, in our towns, and making sure that we get diesel cars and reduce the diesel emissions in our cities and towns, because that is a big contributor to breathing problems. So I think that we should think about air pollution. Secondly, we should definitely also consider adapting to climate change as well as trying to slow it down. Because with the best will in the world, in Britain here, we're only about 2% of emissions. The 98% of emissions come from outside Britain. We are going to have to take adaptive measures, and if elected, I'll be looking at those as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Great.
I think I struggled to add more to my Green candidate friend next to me. I think he said most of the things people said, and everyone else, and this might be the only thing on the panel that everyone agrees with tonight, which is quite nice. My concern is about education, and not education as an earlier, but when governments previously say that drive a diesel because it's cleaner than a petrol. So how did it come about that everyone buys a diesel because they said they're cleaner, and then a few years later they flip-flop and say, well, now you've got to get rid of your diesel and buy a petrol? Can we just get the actual facts and understand what's going on? And then if diesels really are dirty, we need obviously to have a system that takes diesels off our roads, and then we replace them perhaps with, could I call it, cleaner petrol engines, but also we look at alternatives like electric cars as well. So I just think it's an education issue that we just need to understand what's clean and what's dirty. Thank you.
Okay, so first of all, we've got to remind ourselves that this is not a hoax. We've got to support Kyoto, we've got to support our own Climate Change Act, 80% reductions of emissions by 2050. All of those. Do you know what else we need? We need some leadership on this. We need somebody to stop holding hands with climate change deniers. Being disappointed, Theresa, is simply not good enough. It is time to show leadership. It is time to come out of hiding. It is time to do the right thing. Stand up for our nation. Stand up for all those states in America that are standing up for themselves. And make a really clear statement to Trump. You're wrong. You were wrong before. You have the planet in your hands and you could spell disaster. She's got to say something fast.
I'm struggling actually to see hands now. Do you think we could have some lights on in the main body of the church? Because I can't actually see if somebody wants to join in with the debate. I can see a person here. Let's go here. Thank you, Phil. That'll help.
Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to make a point actually on this climate change. Last Friday in the UK, we generated more power from solar power than we did from nuclear power. It's an interesting point.
Thank you. Anybody else? You've got one behind you, John.
Good evening. I'm an undecided voter. Perhaps naively I came here this evening hoping to hear what everybody was going to do, what they're proposing to change. A special request, please, for the rest of this meeting. When you're asked what you're going to do, instead of issuing rhetoric, which a lot of us agree with, I'd really like to know what your policy is personally and from the party.
I'd just like to mention we have a government that is supporting, encouraging the extension of fossil fuels. And it comes in the form of fracking. I come from Lancashire, but they're actually literally ruining the countryside to get even more gas out of the ground that we don't actually burn if we're going to keep into our quotas for climate change. What is Theresa May going to do about that immediately, please?
We're going to move on now to our next topic. I dare mention it, Brexit. So I'd like to ask Major Palmer to ask.
Right, I'll ask the question on her behalf. I thought she was coming, and one or two did ask it. I would like to ask the candidates how they plan to protect the rights of EU citizens living in this constituency, given the uncertainty they now face because of Brexit.
And can I invite Bim to start?
Well, I think this needs to be item number one on the government's agenda when doing Brexit negotiations with the European Union. It must be just terrible to be in that position. I know that I wouldn't want to be in that position in this country, so I think that's something we do need to sort out immediately. In addition, though, what we also need to do is make sure that British citizens in the European Union also have their rights protected too. And we shouldn't forget about that when we consider this.
Sid, would you like to respond?
I mean, our policy is they should be given an immediate guarantee. I mean, I don't think, honestly, we need to wait for negotiations because it will be virtually impossible for the European Union, under its rules with the Human Rights Court and extra, to throw out all the British people out of Europe. So, I mean, the government's saying, oh, we've got to wait for negotiation. Rubbish. We can give the guarantee now. Let's give the guarantee and get on with it.
Well, the best way to guarantee the rights of EU citizens living here is to respect the wishes of the people of Hitchin and Harpenden and not leave the European Union. Failing that, I think yes, we can unilaterally give a guarantee to those who are already here that they can stay. Yes, of course we need to protect Britons in the European Union, but I think the other EU countries will reciprocate if we jump first. And we need to stop the disgraceful Kafkaesque situation that many people are now facing when they apply for permanent residency, where they're getting threatening letters from the Home Office telling them that they're not welcome here and they should prepare to leave. That is an absolute disgrace. It's probably illegal, and it's another example of a computer says no attitudes of public services that we see under the Conservatives.
Okay, the Green Party would have a second referendum once we know what the deal is that we receive from Europe. We believe that it was missold to the public. There was a great deal of fake news, big fat lies on the sides of red buses and that sort of thing going on. So I think the British people need the opportunity to be asked again. Also, we seek to protect the right to live in this country for those European people from Europe who are working in us. We mentioned the NHS and the large majority of people who are working there. And we do invite free movement across Europe. However, that must go hand in hand with security and safety for the people in this country.
So at the time that Article 50 was triggered, opposition parties attempted to put an amendment forward to provide immediate protection in the UK for EU citizens, and the Tories voted it down. That's a disgrace. So much of what they do, they then come back with rhetoric about, well, we want to protect the UK citizens in the EU as well. Yeah, but okay, we'll get on to that. We could easily have already provided EU citizens in this country with the protection that they so desperately need. My view is, ultimately, we have to apply. We've got 6 tests. I'm conscious of the lady over there who said we need to actually tell you what our parties are doing about these things. So we've got 6 tests. I only have a minute. I can't tell you what they all are. They're very good ones. Trust me. But we must protect the residency of EU nationals, UK nationals, no matter where they live.
I think this is quite straightforward, really. I think the Prime Minister needs to take the moral high ground and just say, let's stop mucking about with people's lives, and we just go to the European Union before we start negotiating and say, this is where we're starting. EU citizens in this country have got the right to remain, guaranteed, and then go back to them and say, why don't you also say the same to us, and it's job done. We don't need to wait until 11 days after the election to start negotiating. Let's just do it now and get it sorted out.
We have an immediate comment from the back there.
Thank you very much. Nafisa Sayani. I have the privilege to be married to a German gentleman. We've been together for over 30 years. Before Schengen, pre-Schengen, post-Schengen, he has taken on British nationality, so he holds 2 passports. If we come out of the EU, currently Germany recognises dual nationality for EU citizens. What happens to him then? Will he lose his German nationality if he wants to stay here?
Thank you. The other.
In addition to being married to a Spaniard, I'm also a university lecturer and academic researcher. This is a very mobile, very international job, and several of my colleagues who are EU citizens have applied for permanent leave to remain, and for various reasons, the very computer says, no, you didn't fill in this exact form, or there's a mistake on some piece of paper somewhere. They've been refused. These people are already people are already leaving universities, UK universities, making us less competitive in the university sector internationally, and going abroad where they're very much more welcome. And I think that's something that we should be thinking about.
One comment at the back there, and the gentleman there.
I don't think anybody can disagree with what the panel have said about the EU nationals staying in this country, but there is a but that's got to be put into the equation, and that is that the European Union is insisting that all EU citizens living in this country will be governed by the European Court of Justice, not by our laws. And yet, if you go, a UK citizen living in another country will be covered by the laws of Europe. There's something wrong there. We voted no to the European Court of Justice.
Thank you. And the gentleman.
Thank you very much. I used to work at WH Smith's in Luton Airport, and I worked alongside people from all corners of the European Union. Portuguese, Poles, Estonian, Maltese. I've worked alongside pretty much every other nationality, and they are amazing people that help contribute to this country, and they actually help keep our industries running, and now they feel unbelievably demonised. I've got a friend of mine that lives actually here in Hitchin, Maltese. He felt sick following what happened with the referendum and the demonisation that he was fearing at the hands of the Conservative government under the influence of one of Britain's most deadly drugs, UKIP. I think it is absolutely repulsive, the fact that it's gone to that level. And let me also bring this up about freedom of movement, going back to the NHS point. One of the people that Peter Lilly regularly dealt with was a woman by the name of Mary Harris, commonly known under the name Maria Maxo. She is an unbelievable actress and an amazing singer. I have heard her sing, it literally brought tears to my eyes. She has now been left with her feet in unbelievably bad state, and it has not been cared for properly by the National Health Service. But if it weren't for the work of workers from France, from Spain, from Portugal, and from all other corners of the European Union and the world, she would probably be in a wheelchair by now. So in my opinion, I think the freedom of movement and the rights of people, EU citizens that live here in this country, they should be protected with every fibre in our being.
So we're moving on to our next topic now, which is disarmament. And I'd like to invite Mario May to give their question. Oh, brilliant. Can you shout?
Under what circumstances would members of the panel be prepared to use Britain's nuclear weapons?
If you didn't hear that, if you support the Trident missile system, under what circumstances would you support it being used?
And I'm going to ask Sid to respond to this first.
Okay, as a Christian, I could never press a nuclear button, but we've got to have some sort of defence in place, which is why our policy is to have a missile shield and to develop the technology, which I'm sure is available, to lock onto incoming missiles and divert them into the ocean. Now, America is under threat from North Korea. What's the first thing Donald Trump has done? Put a missile shield into South Korea to shoot down any missiles that North Korea might direct at America. But we're not thinking like that. Throughout history, when people have gone into battle, they've had a sword and a shield. We think that we just have a sword, we just threaten the opposition. We've got this idea of mutually assured destruction. You destroy one of our cities, we'll destroy one of yours, and that will stop them. I'm sorry, in the world where Pakistan has nuclear weapons, and possibly Iran, that sort of thinking doesn't work. We've got to have defensive systems in place that can properly defend this country without just blowing people up willy-nilly out of the sky.
Thank you, Sid. I can invite Bim to respond next, please.
Look, I do support Trident. I think that Trident has been the cornerstone of our security since the Second World War. It was a Labour government that brought it in, and I'm glad that they did. And in terms of whether I'd use it or not, now look, it's a deterrent. It's not meant to be used, it's meant to deter, but ultimately, well, that's the whole point of a deterrent. But if attacked, then we should use it.
Thank you, Bim.
What would that accomplish?
Can we just...
What would that accomplish?
There'll be time...
Once the weapons being fired, and you fire back...
Can I just say there are...
millions of children, innocent civilians,
Can we just hold questions and statements? As valid as statements and comments are, if we can allow all the candidates to speak first, then there will be time for comments afterwards. John.
Bim, thank you very much. You've just made up my mind. What I'd written was that I'm torn on this issue because I understand the need for deterrence. But if the Tory party is now saying they're prepared to press the button and wipe out billions of innocent people, then I think I've just become a unilateralist. We can't afford Trident. 31 billion is the estimate, with another 10 billion in contingency. 180 countries in the world don't have a nuclear deterrent at all. But we feel the need to invest that much money instead of putting it into hospitals and schools and food banks and poverty and housing. And the fact that the Tory representative here is prepared to press that button and wipe out all of those innocent people, no matter what they've done to us, even if they've already fired a weapon at us, what would be the point in killing them as well? I see no purpose to that. I couldn't do it. I can't answer that question any more than that.
Thank you. Hugh.
Yeah, I think Sid's rationale is quite good to move more towards defensive, because if you have a missile that's fired by a rogue state, they're not going to be deterred by the consequences. They don't care about the consequences. They're just going to go ahead and do it. So yes, my own personal view is that Trident is a massive white elephant, and no, I don't support it. My party's view is a multilateralist one. We would like to see the world rid of nuclear weapons, and we would like to work with international partners to achieve that. Personally, I would like to make the use of nuclear weapons automatically a war crime, and anyone using them would have to demonstrate that there was an immediate military threat, and that the use of nuclear weapons was proportionate to that threat. And frankly, good luck to them with that.
Thank you, Hugh.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the hardest questions to answer for most on the panel. I was raised to believe that we need nuclear weapons because if we've got them, no one's going to attack us. I just think we've got to sort of start moving in this world now where we say, why do we have to have them? And perhaps if we are such a big nation, can't we start to say, we're going to get rid of ours, why don't you start getting rid of yours? I'm not sure this total mutual destruction idea works anymore. I used to say it doesn't matter what it costs if you need a deterrent, but actually if we can save 30, 40, 100 billion, nobody knows the actual amount, why don't we just say, as Trident is too old, let's just say, let's let it go dead, and let's think about defences, like Sid, I agree with Sid, but we don't need a nuclear deterrent any longer.
It's 9:05 and Mr. Afolami has taken us to nuclear Armageddon. Wow. The Green Party are very clear on this point. We'll scrap Trident. Let's give it a different name, weapons of mass destruction. This will save us 110 billion in the next 30 years. We will also have an ethical foreign policy cancelling all arms deals with oppressive regimes. The argument that this is a deterrent, you have to imagine we have these nations with their fingers over the buttons. It just takes one malfunction, one itchy trigger finger, one computer hacker. We've seen what's happened recently with computer hacking of the NHS, etc. And it will end human existence on this planet. The Green Party will invest in public services and the living, and not killing and death.
Comments, questions from the floor? I'm a Quaker, so naturally I would be against it. But many years ago, when William Penn, who became a Quaker, and he was a Member of Parliament in the days when they still wore swords. And this was at the time when you were not complete as a gentleman without your sword. And he was worried about this, and he had a word with George Fox about it. And George Fox says, wear it as long as thou canst. Quite some time later, he saw William Penn without his sword. And he said, I wore it as long as I could. Isn't this nuclear weapon now just a vanity? Isn't it just something like a gentleman's sword that we wear internationally? Isn't it time we gave it up?
I just wanted to say that there are some of us who are quite old in this room, me included, who lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis. And anybody who lived through that, and I did, knows how awful the thought of Armageddon was. However, there was a deterrent that one person knew that the other person pressed the button, it would be Armageddon. And the deterrent is the critical thing as far as this is concerned. Thank you.
Yep.
Boris Johnson said recently that if the Americans asked us to take part in a bombing raid somewhere or other, it would be very difficult for this Tory government to say no. I'm concerned that now we've got an aggressive, unpredictable man in the White House. He might drag us into a bombing raid or even a war.
Thank you. We're going to move on now to a couple of local issues. So firstly, a question on the local green belt from Cheryl Norgan.
I have seen how both Labour and Conservative county and district councillors have recently violated their manifesto policies on the green belt, even when heavily lobbied by the public. So what is the point of the parties having manifestos if their representatives continue to ignore their pledges? What are the current views on the permanence of the green belt in North Herts?
Thank you. John, if you'd like to kick us off.
Yeah, thank you for that. I did check this. In terms of the local manifesto, we talk about providing social housing. We don't mention Greenbelt. And in the current manifesto, the national manifesto, we talk about prioritising brownfield sites and protecting the Greenbelt. However, we have a housing crisis and we need to build affordable homes. We need to build sustainable homes that are sympathetic to the environment and to the countryside, because there is a rising cost of housing and we need to do something about that. I think passionately that we should always prioritise brownfield sites to begin with, but needs must. And I think from time to time, the need to build into the green belt is something that we just have to bite the bullet on and deal with. Now, I'm not suggesting we're talking about multi-millionaire pads with helicopter fields in front of them. We need proper, sustainable housing for everyone, and we need to find it, and we need to find it relatively quickly.
I think we've got a lot of brownfield sites that can be developed on, and I'm a bit concerned about, we always keep talking about the green belt, and I'm of the view that the green belt can be protected. I think there's enough spaces out there to fill holes. They're brownfield sites. I think the problem is that perhaps local authorities say to builders, what would you fancy building on? Do you want to build on this dirty brownfield site, or do you want to build on this lush green field? And funny enough, the builders come back and say, it would be quite easy to build on that field. It would cost us a lot more to clean that dirty brownfield site up. So what happens? They get the greenfield site. So why don't we just say to the builders, if you want to build, please do, but you have to build on the brownfield. Let's build 1 million homes on the brownfield sites first. If we then run out, we'll have a conversation about the greenbelt. But let's stop talking about the greenbelt now.
Look, I think we're all in agreement that the green belt is of paramount importance to all of us. Earlier on today, I was in Lee Green, Mangrove Green, Cano. They've got huge developments slated there. I was in Perkin yesterday. They've got huge housing developments slated there. It is absolutely awful for residents when they feel that development is being forced upon them. We need to make sure that we avoid building on greenbelt wherever possible. What we also have to do, however, is look more broadly and think about where we can possibly put, I think somebody mentioned it earlier, a garden city, because I think that that sort of radical solution could be a big part of how we can fix our housing problem in the next 20-25 years.
Thank you, Bim. Sid, I can ask you to respond next, please.
Earlier, when we were asked a question about housing, I made it clear that, in my opinion, we should not be building more housing on the edges of Hitchin. And I think I was the only person that actually gave that answer. And, you know, as far as I'm concerned, absolutely the green belt is paramount, but it's no good actually saying that when we're asked this question. What about when we're asked the question on housing? You see, we've got to have a proper planning approach. And a proper planning approach means you've got to look at the options. It's not true that there's loads of brownfield sites. There aren't loads of sites where there's been factories that that are now being removed, and we can build on the site where there were factories. I mean, there aren't loads of sites like that. I'm sorry, there aren't. I mean, if there were, then absolutely we'd say, yeah, there's loads of sites where there's disused factories, we can now build housing on those sites. But the reality is that where the infrastructure is in place, as I said earlier, is around the Stevenage area, and that is where it makes sense to be building more housing. And we've got to make sure the infrastructure is there, the infrastructure makes sense, everything is related, communities are working, communities are functioning properly. We can't just build
Thanks very much,
in different places.
Thank you. Richard.
Okay, the Green Party are very clear on this one. No building on Greenbelt land at all. Brownfield sites only. This is a local question, so let's talk about local things. Lots of building going on in and around Hitchin and Harpenden. What I would be asking for is proper consultation with the people who already live there. We should not have to go and find where the plan's been put up or look in the back of the local newspapers between the shed adverts and the call girls to see what's being planned for us. We want proper consultation. Before the building companies plan to build, they need to consult people, they need to plan proper roads, upgrades on utilities. They need to, before they come to profits, build a school for all the young families coming in with their children, putting a strain on everything. Let's not have a new customer-only approach to new building and developments.
Thank you very much. And Hugh.
Well, thank you, Bim, for endorsing our policy on garden cities. Good to have you on board. Of course, I grew up in one, so happy about that. Now, a number of very valid points made by the speakers, which I won't repeat. What I will say is, to complement that, is you need to be careful about definitions. Somebody's garden is counted as a brownfield site under current regulations. The Green Belt goes back to the Town and Country Planning Act of 1944. And I think there is room for a little bit of flexibility and pragmatism in choosing sites that are right for the local area, for local people, and building the right sort of houses that people actually need, and not the sort of 4-bedroom detached homes Bim was referring to earlier.
Thank you. A couple of quick comments from the floor. Yep, back there, and then the gentleman there, and then the lady at the back there.
It's an interesting crossover of several issues here. Hitchin Girls' School has a very large green field, which, if it was sold off, would give us many millions that we could use on education. It's become a park, or what's it called, a village green, and none of it at all can now be used for development, which is tremendous news for all the houses around there because all the values have gone up. Near where I live, which was on the Greenbelt, my house was a Greenbelt site in 1925, before they built the house, they're going to do the same thing. Now, again, it's tremendous for people who are currently living in Hitchin, because these will be preserved as village greens, but again, you know, if you want to build houses inside Hitchin, you're going to have to turn to some of this area, possibly.
Thank you. And lady back there. I'm sorry.
You mentioned this is a local issue. I actually don't think so. I think it's a national issue, and it's a little bit complex. It's related to the fact that London and the South East has a kind of imbalanced amount of jobs and investment, and I think that we need to be devolving power and encouraging companies to be based in other parts of the UK, which would take pressure off having to have so much housing. I know personally I'd be happy to live further away from London, but I can't find work in my industry anywhere other than London. And I believe the Labour Party manifesto is the only one that actually refers to the fact that London is taking up so many of our jobs and so much of our investment, and talks about devolution.
Thank you very much. We are going to move on to our final question, which is a truly local issue. Take absolutely your point about the Green Belt as a wider issue, but this is Hitchin Museum, which is purely local.
Thank you very much. My name's Jacqueline MacDonald, and I would like to thank very much the organisers of tonight's meeting for selecting my question to all the candidates sitting on the top table. Here's my question. On the 3rd of March this year, I presented an online petition signed by 520 people to the Right Honourable Peter Lilly MP at his Great Ashby surgery on behalf of the social media pressure group The Future of Hitchin Town Hall and Museum. This petition is calling for an independent public inquiry into the current ongoing Hitchin Town Hall and Museum fiasco. The prime reasons for calling for a public inquiry are due to the mismanagement of the project of the council's assets, turning a 2.35 million project into one costing approximately 6 million. The project has also been flawed with many other problems, and the North Hertfordshire Museum still remains unopened to the general public to this day. At the meeting on the 3rd of March, Mr. Lilly was extremely sympathetic to our cause and offered to contact the local government audit commission to set the wheels in motion for further investigation into the project. I have been informed by Mr. Lilly in recent weeks that he has in fact contacted them, but has of yet received no response. And in actual fact, he's contacted them twice and received no response. If you, the candidates on the top table tonight, all of you, if you are elected, my question is to all of you, as the new Member of Parliament for the Hitchin and Harpenden constituency, will you take up the reins from Mr. Lilly where he left off in respect of this issue? What is your overall viewpoint on the project, and how proactive will you be in taking up the cause? This is public money at stake.
Thank you very much. Richard, you're going to continue first.
To be honest with you, Jackie, I think Mr. Lilly was fobbing you off a bit there. He was giving you the right noises, but actually, as an MP representing you, he should be following through with that, and not just give you the answer that he's waiting for someone to get back to you. That's not leadership, and that's not, you didn't get the right response there. We need someone who is going to lead us, and you know, the chances are that it will be Mr. Afolami next week because of the huge, 2 years ago, 50%, it's down to you guys, right? Okay. Mr. Afolami described himself in a recent interview with Laith over there as a facilitator, bringing together neighbouring MPs, local councillors to see if we can come to an agreement on particular issues. We don't need a facilitator for Hitchin and Harpenden, we need a strong leader who's going to fight for your rights.
Okay, I think this is a classic case of really poor leadership. A succession of mismanagement, factional infighting. The Tory group, I think, factional infighting, dare I say it, not quite as united as they often want to present themselves to be. The Labour group have made very public their concerns and criticisms, and much of that widely reported in the press. I'm sure all of you are aware of that. But I understand right now, to be completely pragmatic about this, some progress is being made. It may well be at huge cost, but I have to say I think it does call into question the role and purpose of Shire District Councils themselves. Perhaps we should look more at unitary authorities with community councils who would better serve the needs of the locals and localities. But I am sure that progress is being made, so with your query about a public inquiry, at this stage I don't think that would be useful. I think it would be a waste of more public money. I think, as Richard has said, you've been fobbed off with that. The local MP should handle that. No public inquiry. Let's get on and make progress and look at it once the project is complete.
Thank you very much.
Well, I don't think we can assume who the next MP is going to be. I think that's really an open competition right now. So let's just say in the outside chance that I became your MP, then unlike Peter Lilly, that perhaps doesn't return phone calls or is busy doing other things with his investments and property, whatever he's doing these days, perhaps what we could do is get an MP that actually phones people back, pursues the issues, cares for local people, doesn't really worry about career, going to government, just somebody who actually phones people back. So why don't we just vote for somebody who cares about the local community, and let's not assume that somebody down that way is definitely going to win this constituency.
Right, yeah, so this whole site has been this absolutely extraordinary catalogue of I'm so slightly lost for words. Infighting, as John said, and incompetence. And you know, I've been told extraordinary stories about this. The staircase that one part of the one public body owns, and the land at the bottom of the staircase is owned by somebody else. So nobody can use the staircase, and nobody can use the land. It's you know, that sort of thing. So yes, I mean the audit commission is probably the best place to start. If that doesn't work, then and the solution that's now being proposed is not satisfactory, then a public inquiry might be necessary. I wouldn't rush headlong into a public inquiry because that would cost even more taxpayers' money. But yes, let's get this sorted, for goodness sake.
Thank you. Now look, I've spoken to Peter Lilly about this. I think it's very wrong, actually. And I think it's really wrong that you assume or that you suggest somehow that he wasn't following this up. He made a point of bringing this up with me when I spoke to him. He was focused on that and desperately trying to get an answer as to this situation with the town hall. What has happened is, if elected on 8th of June, I will follow up with that, keep pressing and keep pushing. And in relation to when you were saying about being a facilitator, actually, any of you you'll be deceived if you think your MP can solve every single problem. That is not true. And anybody who claims that they can is lying. What you can do, however, as a Member of Parliament, is you can go to the right offices, work together with people, work together with local government, the central government, bring people together and actually help achieve solutions rather than always grandstanding about what you support or oppose.
I think we're basically agreed that a public inquiry is not the right way round, because public inquiries themselves cost millions of pounds, and basically all you're doing is going over the past. You're not actually solving anything. What we need to do is to get on and solve the problem. With my experience in local government, having been a councillor and understand some of the issues, I believe that I can take a lead and bring the people together that need to be brought together and get the problem solved, because that's what we need to do. Involving the Audit Commission is sensible, because the Audit Commission has statutory powers to look into it, and certainly it's good to involve them, but we can't rely on the Audit Commission. We've got to get on and do it and get the problem solved.
Thank you, Sid. We're fast approaching the 9:30 deadline, and so I'd like at this point to invite each candidate in one sentence, and one sentence only, to say why they should be elected, and we'll start with Ray.
I'm not going to say any sort of fancy stuff. I just take the view that I think the constituency needs somebody that cares. I'm independent, I'm the outsider, I was a late entry, but I've been a parish councillor for 2 years, I care about my parish, and I just think being an MP is just like being a parish councillor, caring for local people, listening to them, calling them back, simple stuff, and then the politics, yes, you've got to get involved, but actually it's just about caring for local people.
Thank you very much, Ray. Bim, would you like to? No, Bim, sorry. Would you like to? One sentence. One sentence. That was a very long sentence, Ray. One sentence.
I believe I've got the right mix of experience, judgment and skills to represent you effectively as your Member of Parliament. And thank you again for coming this evening.
Thank you, Bim.
I won't give a reason for voting for me. I can give you 1,000 reasons for not voting Conservative. So pick one of those and make the right choice. Future generations will thank you for it.
So I would like you to vote for me because I will represent everyone in this constituency in an open, honest and effective way, because our country should be better fairer, a society that meets the needs of all of us, not just the privileged few. Vote Labour.
Only one of the policies which we're standing on has been discussed tonight, and that is caring for the poor and looking at food banks. The other policies haven't been discussed. That is the importance of marriage, which we've got detailed policies to uphold marriage through the tax system. I understand people here saying you don't like marriage, but I'm a Christian. We love marriage. And reducing the number of abortions, we've got detailed policies to see them reduced. So these are policies that haven't been discussed. But I need to tell you why we're standing, and these policies are important.
You have had your one sentence. Sorry, we asked you one sentence. Thank you.
You see, this is it, isn't it? You see, the issues that are important to Christians is that we don't want to talk about those
Can we
policies.
turn the microphone off, please? Thank you. And Hugh.
Well, as well as having experience spanning the public, private and voluntary sectors, I'm the only candidate who reflects the views expressed by the majority of people in this constituency on the key issue that defines this election and the reason for which it was called. And I think that's probably a good enough reason to vote for me.
We've reached 9:30. I just want to close with a few thank yous. Thank you firstly to all of you for turning up tonight, for coping with a very hot evening, and for all the questions and comments that you've made. Thanks to the candidates for turning up. It's lovely to have everybody who's standing in Parliament turning up to I thank Hitchin Christian Centre for hosting us so well tonight. To John Skeels and Helen Richardson for doing such a grand job on the timing of the bell. And finally, an absolute massive thank you to John Richardson, who has single-handedly coordinated all of this, has received, as we said earlier, over 70 questions from people, has made all the contacts with the candidates, liaised with everybody. So can we give John a huge round of applause? Just wanted to say that those of you who submitted questions in advance of this evening who didn't get an opportunity to ask those questions, all those questions are going to be emailed to the candidates for them to be able to email you their response. Thank you all very much for coming, and go and find some fresh air.